Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon, 7 till 8 every Thursday on my YouTube channel. And tonight we're going to speak about something that I think is very helpful to people and can bring an end to a lot of their problems. And that's people who suffer from insomnia, you know, the terrible, dreaded situation of not being able to get to sleep every night, etc. Well, the truth of the matter is, we all sleep to some extent. To say if you to say that you don't sleep at all, it couldn't possibly be true, because your body would start to break down, and you'd come to an end if you didn't get any sleep at all. But certainly there are different people who manage and get by with a lot less sleep than other people. I remember once talking to a very, very famous football player, and not with us anymore, but he was talking to me about this, and he would frequently go out to nightclubs and, stop out till all hours of the morning, and then have a shower in the morning if he had had any sleep, and turn out in the afternoon and play for a very major football club, and get away with it. But I think he was a very special person. But I was a little bit like that myself, to be quite honest. As a teenager, I worked I worked for Decca, the Decca Recording Company, as a very young lad in my teens, and later my family moved to Warsaw. And I used to go out certainly till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was you've got to get up to go to work the next day. You've got to be in for 8 or 9 o'clock, whatever your times were. And you know what? Somehow I used to manage it, and I'm sure lots of other teenagers had the same experiences. But especially as you get older, more and more you need to sleep. You need to sleep more and get that relaxing night's experience of winding down and going to sleep. A lot of people will say to me that their insomnia means that they don't sleep at all. I've already said to you that can't be possible. What you need to be really addressing, and what the techniques that I call are called spiritual techniques to cure insomnia, also using hypnosis. The two go together very, very well, and can bring an end to people who have very little sleep, learn to sleep a lot better. But I'll tell you a couple of examples of how sort of past life experiences of this in this life, not past life experiences from when you lived in other lives. This life I'm talking about. And I've jotted a few things down there to remind me. I mentioned the lad who was the football player, but I've also had another experience of helping another lad really who had a lot of problems. Would you call it abuse? I think you probably would. What used to happen, his father was very, very strict. And at 6 o'clock at night, every night he had to go to bed. And, from his bedroom, he could hear the other kids playing and having lots of fun. He says he often used to see the kids of the street playing cricket or football, and every hour or something like that. And his dad would come up and, "Oh, you asleep now? I'll come up there, all this and that. And it was very, 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 very bad to him, really. And that's a form of abuse, isn't it, really, to do that? I mean, a lot of kids used to have to go to bed early. I know that it's a common thing, but what I'm just trying to explain to you is if you push it too much, and like with this lad who, he didn't go to sleep the minute that the door was locked and he could hear his father go down the stairs. He'd be up at the window watching the kids play football. And then if he had any steps, leap back into bed, pretend to be asleep. And I mean, there's a lot more I could tell you about this lad's experiences. He had a very bad, difficult time with his father. Generally, he was very much involved with drinking. He used to go out drinking, spend the family money on drinking, gambling, all that sort of things. and more often than not, as I say, when he was, let's say, not himself, coming home not himself, he would wake the kids up who were in bed and asleep. And what I'm trying to explain to you, sort of little triggers like that, that sort of abuse, because it is abuse, isn't it? You know, or I mean, there are other forms of abuse as well. If you suffered from, I suppose sexual abuse or that sort of thing when you were a kid, that's the sort of thing that can either cause you to have night terrors or to have bad dreams, or to find a way not to go to sleep so as you wouldn't dream about it or experience it again. And the spiritual techniques that I use also involve hypnosis, and it can work. No one, no one, people will say to me, I've tried everything, there's nothing can cure me. We can, we can. You can be cured of hypnosis, but using hypnosis and spiritual techniques, you can bring your insomnia to an end. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but using those techniques will do it. Spiritual techniques for insomnia often blend clinical hypnosis with faith-based mindfulness practices to sort of transition the mind into a state of deep receptivity and peace, and often sometimes backing that up with several sessions of teaching the person about self hypnosis to back that up as well. Spiritual hypnosis techniques. What do I mean? Faith, faith focused post hypnotic suggestions. I suppose you've all heard of those. During a very relaxed state, repeat simple affirmations or post hypnotic suggestions. Spirit when you go to bed, obviously, or when you want to sleep. Spiritual examples would include: I trust my body to be at one, to be very relaxed, and to bring me sleep. Another one could be: I surrender my mind to those who will protect me in the higher life. Higher forces, our powers, will help me and keep me safe when I'm asleep. This is something that we use with the lad who was often woken by his father. It was way over the top, really. And those sort of things we use. Visualization, sacred metaphors. Now you're going to wonder what I'm on about there, but deepening in a trance by visualizing very simple things like you would say perhaps I would sort of get you to say a ball rolling down a wall and then going back up the wall and rolling down again, going up. And that's sort of similarities to the way you sleep, because we're never really completely asleep. And you can check this because there's something called rapid eye movements, REMs. And if you was to watch somebody when they were asleep, you'd see their eyes fluttering on various occasions like that, and that's rapid eye movements would prove the point. But if you can teach that person to sort of spend a relaxing time seeing that ball or just along a wall or something. I had one, funny enough, it's not there now for a very terrible reason, but those of you who remember the Crooked House it was out Kinver way, wasn't it? That way, the Crooked House was on the news, wasn't it? Where the ball could rise up a ledge rather than for rolling down it. And this guy used to use the technique of saying that, of the ball rolling down, up, down. And it worked. It helped him to come into a state of understanding, how we could tune into things. I suppose, really, we would suggest as well that you could look into, using things like I trust my soul to keep me safe. I surrender any upsets or things that have caused me to be upset in my early years to be taken away from me, or in some cases for me to be able to remember them and take that association away from when it's time to go to sleep. It's not easy to explain this, but I'm doing it as well as I possibly can in simple terms. Age regression to restful states. Focusing on early memories of when sleep came easily and naturally can be extremely beneficial. if you can learn the techniques to be able to do that and start sort of recoaching the brain to accept that the state of peace that you can be in will help you to bring yourself into the sleep state. And these things work. There's something called energy cleansing hypnosis using guided imagery. It's a little bit like the ball that I just told you about, that you visualize the evaporation of destructive energy, of tensions from the body, moving them down from your head, down to your body, down to your feet. Just take those negative energies out. You feel a lot more relaxed and find it a lot more easier to sleep. It works. And this isn't really rocket science. It's very special techniques, but it's not rocket science. Complementary faith-based practices and understanding. Well, there's a thing called surrender prayer, transforming nightmare anxieties into prayers, offering them up to the divine guidance to release the mental burden of sorting problems out before you go to sleep. Because it's a fact that often when we go to bed, that is the time when we'll think about the problems that we're having in life. It might be something to do with money, or it might be to do with health, or all sorts of things, family issues. And we all worry about those things. But if you take them to your sleep when it's time to sleep, then you know you're going to focus them and not get asleep. I've got to admit, I always say, to be quite honest, surrendering to prayer is good, you know. But in some ways, I can always come up with the answer to a lot of difficulties the next day when I've been asleep. But I need to get a deep sleep to do that. I'll often say to my wife, I'll understand this better in the morning. I'll have the answer to that. And I do. But if you suffer from insomnia, you can't do that because your brain's always active, you know. I had another lady who was a very good singer guitar player, and she used to get very little sleep. And she was really, I'm not going to say who, but she was really successful and well known. But she found life very difficult because she couldn't get the sleep that she needed. And, you know, she'd sort of think, well, is it affecting my performance? And, you know, people would say, no, no, you're absolutely fine, don't worry. But it does to some extent. And you're going to find out, well, she found after she'd performed on stage that she felt absolutely washed out. And yet, and yet she couldn't sleep, you know, because she trained her mind in such a way that, you know, she used to worry about these things and think about them and, you know, not be able to understand how you put them to one side before you do go to sleep. Now, I'm getting a little bit more, well, now I'll carry on with what I was saying. Surrender prayer, transforming nightmare anxieties into prayers, offering them up to divine guidance to release the mental burden of fixing problems before you go to sleep. So not necessarily when you come out of sleep or wake up in the morning, but beforehand. This might be sounding a bit technical, and it's not really. It's quite simple when you come to understand it. Yeah, now, this is an important thing that you need to know about if you suffer from terrible insomnia. Learning to forgive. Learning to forgive is a very important thing that you have to learn to do. And you may be able to hear my dog there barking in the background while I'm doing this recording. I do apologise, but nothing really I can do about it. So I'm going to carry on. And I do apologise. He's doing his job, isn't it, really? I think somebody may have come to the door or a firework or something. Never mind. But you need to learn to understand those forgivable rituals, training those as well. We all do things when we're kids that we regret, don't we? Or we make mistakes in life that we think, well, I wish I hadn't done that or I shouldn't have done that. But you have to learn to forgive yourself. And when you learn to forgive yourself and learn that we all do these things, we all do things that we shouldn't, and we all have regrets. And one of the most easy time to think about them and remember them is when, you know, you're tucked up in bed and you should be going to sleep. But if you can learn to forgive yourself or work with somebody who can help you to understand and forgive yourself, the things that happened to you when you were a child or a teenager or anything like that, and you learn to forgive yourself, not blame yourself for things. Situations create the problems that you have in life. Very rarely is it really your fault that things happen to you. But in your mind, you might think that it is. And you need to learn to relax and move on from those sort of things. I knew another friend who was, well, how can I put it? He's a very successful actor. But at one time in his life, he'd been I think he wanted to forward his career, and he'd been introduced to some gentlemen who would be able to help him with his career, push him. And he found that one understood the type of person he was, and but he was fairly immature. And this older gentleman took advantage of him. I think you can work that out, what I'm talking about, you know. But I think the actor who I work with always thought, well, that's my fault. I shouldn't have been silly enough to get in a situation where I would be with him, you know, or, I shouldn't have gone there, or I shouldn't have accepted his advice or help. But we do. And if you've got things like that, it's hard to sleep sometimes. The other one, of course, perhaps the one that I think is probably the most often that we've addressed and come across is where you lose someone and you find that when you go to bed, you can't stop thinking about them. And you say your prayers by all means. And, like if you follow my way of religion, ask Lord God to keep them safe and let the spirit will look after them and keep them sound. And, one day, you'll meet them again and all that sort of thing. Say your prayers, but at the same time, you don't want to be going over and over again, remembering things that you might have done different. Parental parental issues can be very, very, very strong in making you not sleep. It's really what I'm talking about, really. We call it forgiveness rituals, forgiving yourself. A lot of people have to learn to forgive themselves. The other one, I suppose, again, is a common one. I've had experiences with people where they have someone that they really cared about and commit suicide. They lose that person too. Still go to the spirit world. You get some silly mediums or silly people who don't know to really know about the higher realms will say that they don't go to the spirit world, but they do. But often, if you've lost somebody in a situation like that or other terrible situation, it can be a very difficult thing to come to terms with because you're always going to think, well, what could I have done? How could I have helped them? And that's all right to think about those things in the day. And really, you might need some help to be relieved of those feelings because if you didn't actually cause them to do it, then it's not your responsibility. Very few people commit suicide when they talk about it. I've got a lot of other experts. I'm a qualified welfare officer, amongst other things. And people say, if you talk to people about their feelings and their suicidal tendencies, you can usually sort that out. But you can't always. You can't always. Often a lot of people you would never expect it. And all of a sudden they do something. They're in the next room or the next street, the next town, you have news that they've passed over to the oil line. And it's difficult because you think, well, couldn't I have done more for him or her? Where was the problem? What could I have done? It's called it's called sacred forgiveness we call it. And when you learn to have sacred forgiveness, you move on from those things because you can't change it. Can't change the book of life of anybody. We all have a pathway to walk and to live in this world and then to pass up to the higher life. You can't change it. It's the way it is. You'll sort of find as well spiritual symbolism, often placing religious sort of statues or scriptures or verses in the bedroom help to create a sort of a sacred environment. I hope I'm explaining this in a way that you can understand. If you can make your, now don't go over the top but if you can make your bedroom more of a sort of sacred place for you to sleep in, maybe with some objects that you feel very comfortable with. A lot of people like to have crystals and things like that. And some people consider crystals to be very sacred, and so be it. But those sort of, I suppose, symbolisms, placing, if you want, religious icons or, things like that in the bedroom can help to create a sacred environment that tells your brain you are in a safe place and you have security all around you. And that will help you to sleep. It's as simple as that. There are lots of other ways that you can address your problems with insomnia, because it's not a very nice thing to suffer, but there are lots of YouTube channels, lots of YouTube videos that you can watch. All I can do really is teach you the way I present and help people. But I won't accept, people say to me, I suffer from insomnia, I can't be, I'll never be cured. It's just something that I have to live with. You don't. And I can help you. And if you want to get in touch and do some workshops or some work in that nature, now, I'm not that very hard to find, am I? If you're watching this, you're probably a Facebook friend, or you might want to pass on the suggestions that I've made to someone else who you know. And that's about it for tonight. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope we've give you some hope if you suffer from insomnia, that you can put an end to it or greatly improve it very quickly. Let's say that. And I think that's something that would be good. You don't want to have a dog barking in the background. I do apologise for that. But I do all my work from a little studio at home. And it's the dog's home as much as it is mine, isn't it? And if someone comes to the door, he's gonna let them know that he's here, and this is his sacred home, if you like. But do take on board what I've said, and if you're one of those people who just can't sleep at night, don't give up and think you can't do anything about it, because you can. And I'll wish you good night and God bless. And we're moving into a 2026 today, aren't we? Into a new year and new times. I wish you all the very best, and that everything is good for you, as I'm sure it will be. Thank you for joining me.